All right, so in this geometry unit, we're going to be talking about angles, angle relationships, triangles, and we're going to break this into two sections. So let's talk about some vocabulary words. We have an acute angle, and you might be familiar with some of these terms, but as a refresher, an acute angle is an angle whose measure equals less than 90 degrees. So measures less than 90 degrees. For example, this is a 45-degree angle, so it is an acute angle. If you have an obtuse angle, that angle measures greater than 90 degrees. And it might look something like this. It's bigger. Anything bigger than 90 degrees. And a straight angle is the same thing as a line. It equals 180 degrees. A right angle measures to be exactly 90 degrees. And you'll know that it's a right angle because there'll be a little square in the corner of that angle. And then perpendicular lines, those are two lines that intersect to form a right angle. So it will look like a plus sign. Supplementary angles are two angles whose sum equals 180 degrees. So you have angles, two angles that you add together and they equal 180 degrees. For example, you might have 120 degrees on this angle and 60 degrees on this angle. When you add them together, they equal 180 degrees. Complementary angles, on the other hand, they are two angles whose sum equals 90 degrees. So you might have a 30-degree angle and a 60-degree angle. But when you add them together, it equals 90 degrees. Now for supplementary and for complementary, they might be touching, like we did for the first example, or they might not be touching. It's just as long as you add them together, they equal that measure. That's what determines if they're supplementary or complementary. And they share a common ray. So let's talk about what this looks like. So if I have these two angles, angle A and angle B are adjacent because they share a common vertex, that's the point, and they share a common ray. That's the line segment that's between those two angles. So adjacent angles are right beside each other. They're touching. One of their lines for the angles are the exact same. Vertical angles are two angles formed by intersecting lines which share no common ray. They are opposites of each other, and they are congruent. What does congruent mean? Well, if we think about the word congruent, we know that that means they are equal to each other. So congruency means that they have the same measure for both angles. That would look like this. Angle A and angle B share this vertex or this point, and you'll see it looks like both angles, like it's a V that's flipped over upside down when they share that point, and they're both equal to each other. They have the same measure. All right, let's talk about the examples that are at the bottom. So we're going to use the vocabulary words that we've just gone over to answer these questions. So for number 1, they form a line, so that means that they equal 180 degrees. So that's going to be supplementary. And they are right beside each other. They share this vertex and this ray, which means they are adjacent. So these are supplementary and adjacent. Angle relationships can have more than one vocabulary word, or they might be only one. So for number 2, they're across from each other, and they both have this, it looks like 2 V's touching each other. That means that they are vertical. Remember, vertical angles are congruent, which means they have the same measure. They're equal to each other. But congruent is not an angle relationship. So we don't identify it as congruent. We identify it as a vertical angle. We just know that they equal each other. All right, and number 3, these angles are less than 90 degrees, so that means that they are acute, but they share this vertex and this ray, which means that they are adjacent. When we talk about angle relationships, we're talking about these 4 words: supplementary, complementary, adjacent, and vertical. I can identify what kind of angle it is based on the degree, but that's not the name of the relationship. We're just looking at these 4 words. All right, and number 4, we know that it's a right angle because it has this little square. And because these 2 angles together form a right angle, that means that they are complementary. And they share a ray and a vertex, which means they are adjacent.